Well, I'm Rob Portman. I was a U.S. Senator from Ohio until earlier this year, and I served 2 terms, 12 years in the Senate. Prior to that, I was in the Bush administration for a while as a director of the Office of Management and Budget, and then I also was a U.S. Trade Representative. And prior to that, I was in the United States House of Representatives for 12 years, so 6 terms there representing Southwest Ohio, Cincinnati area. I think civility is pretty straightforward. I think most people know that. I think you either learn it in your family or maybe you learn it in your place of worship, and you kind of know that it's good to be respectful of other people's points of view, to be kind to people, and in the political context, I think it's really important because it relates to how you get things done. And somehow when people get into politics, sometimes the civility drops out. And the problem with that, in my view, is not that civility in and of itself, is the goal, but then it's hard to work with that other person to actually pass meaningful legislation or regulations, particularly in the political environment. I think somehow we've gotten away from it, and that has resulted in a more difficult time passing good policy, because if you don't have that ability to find common ground, which comes from civility, bipartisanship, respecting the other person's point of view, then it's really tough to get things done. I think you have to have a sense of, what your North Star is, what's your goal, what's your objective in public service. And I think for most people I know in public service, they get involved because they do want to make a difference for the people they represent and for their families, whether it's at the local level where you're interested in ensuring people's quality of life is good, or whether it's a state level where maybe you're involved in some of the difficult issues between Republicans and Democrats, taxes, spending, social issues, and so on. But your goal is, I hope, not to do it for yourself, but as a public servant to actually make progress on issues that are important. You've got to be able to look at the other person's point of view and respect that. One thing we hear a lot is you can disagree without being disagreeable. That's part of it. I am not one who believes that you need to be a centrist or a moderate in order to be civil. You can be civil if you're way off to the left or if you're on the right. We see people who are very conservative or progressive who are also willing to engage in bipartisanship, actually, and get some things done. Because Dianne Feinstein just passed away, I'll use her as an example. I used to work with her on issues that related to the drug issue. She was co-chair of the drug caucus, so prevention, education, trying to ensure people can get into treatment if they need it, and longer-term recovery. And so she was willing to work with me and with others on issues like that, also child homelessness. And so we didn't agree. Like, I was a Republican, she was a Democrat, I'm pretty conservative, she's pretty liberal. We didn't agree on 90% of the issues, but it didn't mean that we couldn't figure out a way to help solve some problems and work together to find that common ground, and we did it. So it pays off. So as you're getting into public service, for those who are new to this, whatever level, if you're at the city level or municipal level or the county level or state level, it pays off to be able to develop relationships and have a certain trust relationship with the other side. So it's about working with people and showing respect for them, listening to them. It comes back to benefit you. The one thing that some folks don't understand as they get into politics, you're going to need people for issues that you might never have imagined. Don't burn bridges because eventually you may need that person to work on something else with you. And again, it's not about you, it's about your constituents, who you're representing. People say that, social media has made the culture more coarse or coarse into dialogue, whatever. It also goes to fundraising. I think part of it, honestly, is that our whole culture is a little less civil, and I've seen this over 30 years of public service. But part of it is, too, some very specific things. One is how people raise money these days. You know, in the old days, it was raising money from your friends and family, and then it was, you know, a broader circle of donors, and people relied heavily on maybe more large donors, you know, who might give you $1,000 versus $50. But increasingly, fundraising is online. And particularly at the federal level now, I'm told most fundraising is online. And I have colleagues, former colleagues on the Republican side, who were raising big-time money online. Sometimes, you know, as much as 30, 40 million bucks a quarter. I mean, just amazing amounts of money. To do that, they felt, and they were right, that they had to go, you know, pretty far into the incivility side in order to raise that money. And I've seen this on both sides. But I'll tell you something, the vast majority of the American people, and this is not based on anecdotes, but based on polling you can see out there, want us to work together. They want you to get stuff done for them. They want you to figure out how to put partisanship aside and solve problems. And all the polling shows that. And yet these factors are sort of centrifugal forces pushing you out, you know, so it's the fundraising, how that's done, it's the media and what they require you. I'm sure there are other factors as well, but those are some that I've identified over the last 30 years of thinking about it and trying to figure out how do we get back to the notion that public service should be about accomplishing things for people. And if you have that attitude, even today in this more partisan environment, you can be successful and you can communicate that to your constituents in a way that can make you, you know, successful in your next election as well. I think everybody has a role, and I think it starts, you know, with our culture. You know, just people need to be kinder to one another. So I think it starts at a very, very basic level. But I don't let politicians off the hook, because I do think politicians are role models. And whether they want to be or not, much like, you know, major sports figures are role models, whether they want to be or not, I do think they have a role to play, and not just to reflect what they might be hearing from their constituents on the right or on the left, but in fact, you know, showing people there is another way here. You can, in a respectful way, disagree, and you can, in a respectful way, you know, figure out how to find that common ground without compromising your principles, but with moving toward the middle on both sides to come up with solutions that actually help people. You know, just before I left, I worked on an infrastructure bill. We had talked about infrastructure for, I don't know, 40 years in Congress, really going back to the 1960s when the interstate highway system was built. That was the last major infrastructure bill. We figured out a way to, starting with a very small group, me and one other person, a Republican and Democrat, Kirsten Sinema, who's now an independent, and then we enlarged the circle to include 5 and 5 of us, and then 10 and 10, and then 20 and 20, and so on. So we sort of started from the middle out. We didn't sort of start with leadership, telling people what they had to do. We said, okay, let's figure out how to do this without raising taxes, and, you know, let's see what we can get done together. We might not be able to do it all. And we ended up with the most comprehensive infrastructure bill really since the 1960s. And it's funded things like the Brent Spence Bridge. If you're from Southwest Ohio, we're finally going to fix it. And that'll make a huge difference in the quality of life for people, not just in Southwest Ohio, but all up and down the 71, 75 corridor. So that's an example of something that we were able to do even in a partisan environment. So if you put your mind to it, it's amazing what you can accomplish. When I got out, I had to find some place to put my congressional papers, and the University of Cincinnati, my hometown university, was interested. And I said I would do it, and asked if they'd be willing to sort of use some of the papers, some of the legislative case studies, to show students that there is a way to work with Republicans and Democrats and get things done. And they were excited about it, so we started what's called the Portman Center for Policy Solutions. And the focus is to encourage civility, bipartisanship, finding common ground, in order to solve policy problems. It's purposely called the Portman Center for Policy Solutions because, again, it's not just about civility being a good thing in and of itself, which is fine, but it's about the fact that without having the ability to work across the aisle, get stuff done, we can't solve our big policy dilemmas in our country. So if you've just been elected to a job in the public sector. Thank you for your willingness to serve. It's not easy. One of my heroes in life was Neil Armstrong. And Neil Armstrong grew up in Wapakoneta and then moved down here to Southwest Ohio, where we are right now. He would say, you know, Rob, public service is a reward in and of itself. I don't need the thank yous. I was rewarded by the honor of being able to serve the public. I know, I'll start cracking up too, because he was a quintessential public servant, in addition to being the most famous astronaut in the world and maybe one of the most famous people in the world. And it wasn't about him. It was truly about the opportunity to serve America. So that's what you're doing, whether you're joining a school board for the first time, or whether you're a county commissioner or a city council person, or whether you're in a statewide office. What you're doing is you're stepping up to serve the people. Servant leadership is something we need more of in this country right now. So I thank you for being willing to step up and do it. And want to listen to people like me try to give you some advice you probably don't need. But thank you.